Tonight, we've got the full moon lighting up the sky. It's Friday night, and the heat is still hanging heavy in the air. Perfect weather for late night fun out in the city, or maybe a get-together out in the country, but also the kind of night where tempers can flare and strange things tend to happen, or so they say. From a weather standpoint, we've got our own mystery going on. That's taking place out in the Atlantic. It's approaching mid-August, and we ask, where are the tropical storms? Where's the hurricanes? Are we dealing with a quiet weather season, or will there be payback in September? That's probably the question of the day. Well, checking out the GFS forecast, we do have the Bermuda High right there. This is the tropical Atlantic. This one wave right here is the first thing that we see. That's going to recurve rapidly to the north. But what we're going to watch is this other system coming out of the Cape Verde Islands area. That's going to track a little bit further south. By the middle of next week, it will be approaching the Leeward Islands, passing just north of there. And then towards the weekend, about 10 days from now, there it is, probably a tropical depression or a tropical storm north of Puerto Rico, heading into the Bahamas. Now, a lot could change between now and then. We could see a track more like this, or a track further south, or no development at all. Nevertheless, that'll be something we'll have to watch, as that conceivably could reach Florida or the southeastern U.S. Looking at our surface analysis this Friday evening, we've got a new cold air mass moving into the northern plains. Temperatures in the 60s and 70s behind this cold front. In the northeastern U.S. and across much of the east, we've got a tropical air mass, dew points into the 70s across a very wide area, all the way to the Great Lakes, 74-degree dew point up there in the UP of Michigan. The Canadian wildfire smoke is still present, but it has dispersed a little bit moving into the Maritimes and much of eastern Canada. The northeastern U.S. a little bit more clear as we reestablish that southerly flow. The northeastern U.S., fair for the most part, some patches of showers and storms in lower Michigan, and of course the wildfire smoke in Quebec and Maine. A lot of the area rather dry. We do have a coastal flood statement in Virginia and southern Chesapeake Bay through tonight, up to half a foot of inundation due to high tides. In the southeastern U.S., a little bit drier than what we've seen. We do have northeasterly flow across the Carolinas into the Piedmont region, some areas of storms around Memphis, and of course down there around New Orleans out to Houston. Coastal flood advisories are in effect for the Carolinas around Wilmington and Charleston tonight due to those high tides, and storms across Florida, but not anything in the way of severe weather. In the southern plains, now we're starting to approach that heat there across the southwest. Yesterday, Dalhart reached 106, and just up the road, Clayton reached 102. Both of those broke the daily records. Today, a heat wave across the Caprock up into the central plains. We were expecting 104 at Amarillo, 105 at Dodge City, and 107 at Goodland, with a large area of 100s along and west of Interstate 35. An extreme heat warning was in effect today across the Tulsa area. Heat indexes were expected to be up to 111, and a very large heat advisory across North Texas, Northwest Texas, on up into Oklahoma and Kansas. And that heat extends into the Central Plains. Yesterday, Denver's overnight low was 74. That set a record warm overnight low for the date. Then as the day went on, we had 106 at Chadron, Nebraska, tying the daily record. Today, that heat advisory extends up into Kansas, into eastern Nebraska, western Missouri, and into Iowa. Heat indexes up to 100s were expected. The very latest temperatures in real time, we've got 105 out there at Garden City, Kansas, 103 at Salina, and a lot of 102s and 103s across central Kansas. Also quite hot out there in Colorado, 104 at Lamar, and we cool down to 87 at Denver, and there's some of that northerly flow behind the cold front, dropping it into the 80s. A slight risk from the Storm Prediction Center covered much of Minnesota this afternoon and evening, basically from St. Cloud to Granite Falls, Fergus Falls, Grand Rapids. Large hail and damaging winds could occur, along with a risk of scattered tornadoes right in this area there. We also have a slight risk in far northwest Nebraska near Chadron into the Pine Ridge Reservation. That's primarily for a few storms with large hail and a low-end risk of damaging winds. Other storms possible across much of the northern and central plains. There could be a few strong storms within that, but tornadoes not really expected except in Minnesota. Yesterday in the southwest, I'll take you back to that on the satellite loop. This is yesterday evening, and it was very, very hot across the deserts. The biggest record of all, 118 at Phoenix. That tied their all-time high for August, and it broke the daily record by 6 degrees. We also saw new daily records at Palm Springs, Indio, and Needles. They all hit 119, and 118 was recorded at Imperial, California. Other records, Yuma 114, Tucson 112, Safford 110, Nogales 107, Douglas 105, and 99 at Prescott. And a record warm overnight low at Desert Rock at the Nevada test site, 82 degrees yesterday morning. That's very unusual. That's the high desert altitude of 3,300 feet. And when I worked at the Tonopah test range, a little bit higher up at 5,500 feet, I don't ever remember seeing a morning low of 70. So 82, that's way up there. For today, however, the heat is not quite as severe. We still have an extreme heat warning in effect for the lower deserts. That calls for temperatures of 105 to 113. Phoenix, Tucson, Yuma, all within that. Heat advisories continue for El Paso and Albuquerque, and heat advisories also continue for the inland areas of Los Angeles and San Diego. It does remain still quite hot out there, 114 at Phoenix at the current time. We are pretty much at the afternoon highs, 117 at Needles, 112. Not sure if that rain is legitimate. I guess it is. They're reporting some clouds, so that's a bit of good news. Maybe some virga coming down, but still 112. It's pretty crazy. 110 at 29 Palms, 104 at Desert Rock, 108 at Las Vegas. Let's check on that possible area of showers. And I think we may actually have some bad data in that area. Imperial, located right there in that valley. There are showers and storms on the higher terrain, but it doesn't appear that they've moved out into the valleys. So sometimes you do have to double check that data, and very likely with 112, it's unlikely that there's going to be clouds and precipitation. In the northwestern U.S., a bit of cold weather at Burns, located right there in the high deserts. They dropped to 34, which tied a record for the date, but they warmed right up to 81 this afternoon. Highs in the 80s just about everywhere across the Pacific Northwest, 60s and 70s in the higher terrain, and they are bracing for heat. There is, let me just show that to you, extreme heat watches and warnings for Portland, for the interior of Washington, the Columbia River Valley, and southwest Oregon, and parts of the Shasta and Siskiyou area. That's mostly going to be for Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Some areas around Medford could reach 105 to 110. Other areas will be well up into the 100s. And I might as well just show you what's coming. This is the forecast highs for today. Obviously, Phoenix broke that 113 forecast. They're at 114 right now. So we go into Saturday and Sunday. We watch the Pacific Northwest warming up. And Sunday, we really turn that heat up to 106 at Medford. No 100s further north just yet, but it could be a different story on Monday, 101 at Yakima and 99 at Pendleton. So this will probably be the peak of the heat wave, maybe into Tuesday, but gradually into midweek, things will start cooling off. Checking on the southwestern monsoon, they are underneath a ridge extending from Arizona to Texas. That's helping to suppress the moisture and provide a rather deep column of dry air in the mid and upper levels. Some changes coming up for next week. We advance this forward. The monsoon activity mostly confined to southeastern Arizona and the higher mountains. But as we go into Sunday and Monday, we start developing southerly flow in advance of this next trough. This could bring some moisture from the Gulf of California northward Thursday and Friday and really bring up those precipitable water values. So 60s showing up for Phoenix for Friday, and then gradually some drying starts returning once again as we get into the weekend. And to be honest, I don't really have a lot to show you in the lower 48, so let's take a quick look at Canada and Alaska. Well, if we paint on the fronts, I don't have the frontal analysis drawn, but that's going to be it right there. That's the warm front, cold front, and the occluded front. This is a chunk of cold air that's surging south, but it's eventually going to get wrapped around back into the Labrador Sea area because this is a very progressive pattern. And it's mostly dominated by these waves traversing west to east. And if we go forward through the upcoming weekend and the following week, pretty much the same story. Here comes another wave out of Alberta for midweek. Cold air comes south, doesn't go very far, and then it sloshes back north. So not much effect for the U.S. itself, which is common for late summer. So here's another wave crossing the prairies on Friday. And we go towards the weekend, 17th and 18th of August, and we're pretty much right back to square one. So what is there that has significance for the U.S.? Well, precipitable water, of course. Typically this time of year, we see quite a bit of it all over the eastern U.S. and nipping at the heels of Arizona as the monsoon becomes active and then backs off again. So over the long term, we're not going to see a whole lot of change, just different areas get affected by these moisture plumes. This is a pretty good chunk of moisture across the southeastern U.S., 2 to 2.5 inches, which is rather high. So that's going to provide some enhanced potential for precipitation each day going into next week. And as we go into midweek, pretty much the same story, moisture all over the place, pretty much from the eastern Great Plains eastward. And it looks like 2 to 2.5 all the way up the northeast coast. So this could be significant going into late next week. Moisture trying to flood into Arizona right there, 1 to 1.5 inch precipitable water amounts, over 2 inches around Hermosillo southward. And towards the end of the period, the weekend of the 17th and 18th, the moisture continues to impact southern Arizona and 2 to 2.5 inch across much of the southeast, parts of the eastern U.S. So this is very, very tropical, and that suggests very good potential for showers and storms all through the eastern and southern U.S. Now, one other chart that I like to look at is the 500 millibar chart. This is the mid-tropospheric, and we do see a subtropical high across New Mexico. This is a very strong high that is weakened gradually late this week, and it's pretty much about gone, just showing a ridge into the eastern U.S. And we've got this trough moving through the northern states, helping to produce frontal precipitation in Minnesota and the Dakotas. So going into next week, let's check it out. We've got subtropical high trying to reestablish itself across Las Vegas and Arizona around midweek, so a continuation of that warm weather. Some sign of a subtropical high right in here, so very warm across the deep south, but they do have that very high precipitable water, so it's going to be warm and rainy across that part of the country. One good trough coming into the northwestern U.S. late next week. Now, I do see the subtropical high right in here. It's not very strong, but it is pretty well defined. That's going to be next weekend, so hot weather across the deep south. And then the extended period, I would say this is pretty average August weather, ridging into the eastern U.S., a little bit of easterly flow in the Gulf Coast area, some indication of a tropical storm or tropical depression there north of Dominica, and progressive flow through Canada and the northern tier states. Let's put it together and look at that forecast going into tomorrow. So there's Saturday afternoon, a frontal system from Minneapolis through Omaha and down through Kansas, bringing cooler weather and breaking up that heat wave that we've got going on today. Highs will be up to 104 at Childress. That's probably going to be the warmest place on the Great Plains. We do see a slight risk of severe storms in the Midwest across eastern Iowa, southern Wisconsin, and far northwestern Illinois. That includes Green Bay, Madison, Dubuque, Waterloo, and Davenport. That's mostly for damaging winds with an isolated tornado risk. We also have a slight risk of severe storms across eastern Colorado, a little bit of upslope flow going on, and that can produce severe weather this time of year. The best area for severe weather between La Junta and Lyman. Large hail will be the main hazard. And we take the edge off that heat in the southwestern U.S. as that upper-level high weakens. Temperatures will run from 100 to 110 in most places. A little bit hotter in California, however, mid-100s in the San Joaquin Valley, 90s popping up in southwestern Oregon as the Pacific heat wave gets underway, and in the southeastern U.S., very rainy across the entire Florida peninsula, the Gulf and Atlantic coast, basically from southeast Texas to the Carolinas. The Interstate 20 corridor remains dry through the early weekend. Then we take it on into Sunday, bring it up to 7 p.m. around peak heating. We do have a marginal risk of severe from basically Lake Michigan through Illinois back to Kansas. This may go a little bit further to the west. We'll have to see how that goes. That will extend into the panhandles and possibly eastern Colorado once again, including Denver and Pueblo. Good chance of rain all through that area. Also, monsoon storms picking up in the higher terrain of Arizona and New Mexico, and scorching heat across the western U.S. up into the 100s in southwestern Oregon, with mid-100s in the San Joaquin Valley. We take it into Monday. A rainy pattern continues through all of the southeast, a little bit of augmentation with this quasi-stationary front that could extend into East Texas as well. Good chance of rain all through the Great Lakes into Illinois and Iowa, and we continue that heat wave in Oregon and Washington up to 95 at Portland, 91 at Tacoma, and 101 at Yakima, 107 for Medford. For Tuesday, another cold front surges south through Montana into the Dakotas. We're going to have extensive showers and storms all through the Gulf Coast once again, possibly expanding into Texas. We may see that sea breeze become active around Houston, Victoria, and College Station. Tuesday, we start to see a little bit of drying in the southwestern deserts for a couple of days. Then that moisture probably will start coming back towards Thursday. The heat wave begins weakening in Oregon and Washington for Tuesday, low 80s at Seattle, and mid-80s for Portland. There's Wednesday, cold front coming through the northern plains. Definitely cooler on Wednesday, a new cold front coming through, 70s for Seattle. The interior drops to the 90s. A warm-up in the Great Plains for midweek, lots of 90s from the Caprock to Denver, North Platte, and Pierre. Then for Thursday, this is where we get a little bit more of that monsoon activity in Arizona and New Mexico. Then we advance through the rest of the period, pretty much stagnant weather across much of the country, except for the northern plains where we have this new cold front coming south. That does not go very far south at all, and just continued southerly flow through the central U.S., warm. Rainy weather continues in the southeastern U.S., and the southwest monsoon affects mostly eastern Arizona. That's all for this episode. A bit of news: I'm expecting to take next week off. Normally I take a break every 3 months, and that's what I did all the way through summer 2024, but the last break that I took was over a year ago, so this is overdue by a large amount. I'll need to take that time to relax and focus on family. Then I'll return on Monday, August 18th. If the plan changes, we'll be back next week, but I expect that we will have that 1 week break. Hope everybody here has a great weekend. Hopefully it's smooth sailing next week, and we'll be back again for another episode in about 10 days. Hope you have a great middle of your month, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.